Hot Take Hockey Podcast with your hosts, Lucas and John Viveiros.
Hey everyone, it's John here from Hot Take Hockey, back with another podcast. And the legend here with me, Lucas Viveiros. So guys, honestly, we're so excited. We've already dropped, as you're watching this video, we've already dropped 2 pods, the intro episode. And you saw if you haven't seen which NHLer it is yet, I mean, I'm not even going to say on this pod. You got to go watch which pod we drop, but we've been so excited to drop these episodes. So this one's a little bit more focused on the Pacific Division and more so the Canucks. We have some big guests coming on today. Legorocks99, a YouTuber, and Canuck Clay as well. Lucas, as we go into the direction of this podcast, are you excited also, as we've talked about, you talked about the NHL, talking about representing all teams. So we're doing some episodes representing each team. How do you feel kind of the direction of the pod?
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited to get into these Canadian teams, break it down, starting with the Canucks really today, and bringing on some great, Canucks representative fan base, loyal fan base guys for the Canucks. So I'm excited for it. We can touch in on obviously JT Miller and the direction the Canucks are going in this year, as well as are they going to get back in the playoffs this year, John? It's going to be some hot takes maybe here today, seeing what we both think and what our guests think as well.
Yeah, I think kind of already, as I said, I think if JT Miller stays on this team, like I don't know how anyone could look at the Canucks and be like, this team's not touching playoffs. I think there's a real shot with a goalie like Thatcher Demko, who I would argue is at the top of his game, a top 5 goalie in the league. Like, I just think there's always a chance in a division like the Pacific Division. Just quickly touch on it, and Lucas, you can give your quick thoughts. Not too much detail on it. I already made the video. Go check it out on Hot Take Hockey. Vegas Golden Knights acquire goaltender Adin Hill from the San Jose Sharks. So relevant to the conversation, because the Pacific Division, when we talk about goaltending and Robin Lehner going down, I think that changed my outlook on the Golden Knights in a big way. I mean, yes, they brought on Phil Kessel and they're still trying to shift things, but they tossed Pacioretty away like nothing, and then losing Lehner for the year. Like, obviously that's going to change my opinion on if the Knights are making the playoffs or not. And obviously directly relevant to our conversation in this pod, if the Canucks are going to make the playoffs. So just quickly, Lucas, I already gave my thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Golden Knights adding Adin Hill? Is it Reimer's job in San Jose for the year? And I mean, is Adin Hill like the guy now in Vegas, or do you still see a Logan Thompson Brossoit situation?
Yeah, I think Vegas, it's getting really interesting with those 3 goalies now. I think from the outside, it looks like Brossoit. I don't know how much faith they really have in him. Logan Thompson is obviously, the guy that should be growing into the role, but Adin Hill at least gives them a little bit more depth to shore it up. I mean, like you said, John, it really affected my opinion as well on the Golden Knights when Robin Lehner went down.
Yeah.
I still think they have a good shot at making the playoffs. It's going to be a tough year with this goaltending. I think it's going to be, up and down and switching, who's playing well on the fly. But Adin Hill at least shores it up a bit, even though it's not like he's, a proven starter or even a 1A type of goaltender. He's really battled with James Reimer in San Jose back and forth. As far as the Sharks go, I think the net is Reimer's for now, but this is almost seeing like, trading one of your 2 goaltenders to a Pacific Division rival.
I know that was what it was for me. It was like the Knights and Sharks being rivals. I mean, they do have Capo Kakkonen, who they brought in the Jacob Middleton trade with, but still, like, I just, you know what I'll add to that is that, and I'll just ask you, because I was kind of thinking about it too, is Logan Thompson that next like Johnny Bernier, Martin Jones, like Adin Hill type, like where he's like kind of like on the fringe and then like mid-20s becomes like that 1B option? Or is Logan Thompson like that one-trick pony, like an Andrew Hammond? That's I don't know what he is, like, because he just stepped on the scene and looked amazing. I mean, he's always had good like numbers in the minors, but still.
Yeah, I guess we're not sure yet. I think this year we're going to have a great idea by the end of the season. We'll have, a much clearer picture on Logan Thompson. Yeah. But I mean, if you're Vegas with these goaltenders, I mean, what are you really striving for? Like 9-10 goaltending, 9-10 save percentage goaltending. If you get that, you're probably happy with how it turned out. But I guess we're going to see when it comes to Vegas. The Sharks making a trade like that, I think they're, stepping back a little bit in the Pacific. I just don't see the Sharks being a serious playoff contender. That's just me at this point. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the Sharks now?
Yeah, just it's one of those things. I think out of the Cali teams, like LA is the only team where I actually look at it and be like, okay, I think they have a real shot at playoffs. But I can't really count on. I mean, the Sharks top like end guys, Couture, Hurdle, Meyer, like LeBanc, like it's not a horrible top 6. I mean, I look at the situation where you got a lot out of Barabanov, but like he's in your top 6, and then like your defense after losing
Just moved out Brett Burns.
Yeah, not to say that he was providing a lot defensively, but it's just like
Mhm.
after Erik Karlsson, like you're talking about names like, I mean, I like Mario Ferraro. I think he's super underrated, but after that, it's like Shimmick and like, I don't know. They brought in a couple other guys, but my point on that is, I think they brought in, was it Nudavara or whoever they brought in? But I just think with the Sharks, it's like, I think they could be like sniffing, but the thing that bugs me about the Sharks is like similar to the Preds, but like the Sharks are even in a worse direction. It's like now you're seeing that official return from that Erik Karlsson trade for Ottawa. It's like,
oh yeah,
San Jose, bro. Like Stützle and Norris, just off the bat, just those two guys alone.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I hate. It bugs me that the Preds have done this, but like at least the Preds are like, I think they can make the playoffs. The Sharks. Yeah, I said Nudavara. Yeah, they signed Nudavara and Matthew Benning. That's the other guy they brought in. Like, and then you have Vlasic, who's just like, what a ridiculous contract. So, anyways, it bugs me because I've always had like a soft spot for San Jose, thinking like, I think they're one of those teams. They made it to the Cup final. I mean, I just brought up the Preds, like similar situation. They both made it to the Cup final, and then like that's all they've had to show for the last decade, basically. So. I don't know. I think it's interesting, but I don't see San Jose in a playoff spot. I think they'll probably just be like that middle of the pack team, maybe a top 10 pick. But I would love to see a San Jose get like a Bedard or one of those top picks. I think it could move along like to see the California teams back at it. Because I think right now, in terms of like moving forward and not like staying stagnant, like Anaheim's moving forward, LA's moving forward, San Jose's just like there.
Yeah, they're getting left behind. I think Anaheim's going to take a little bit more of a step this year, but the Kings were a big surprise last year, and I can see that momentum continuing where they're going to be a handful all season long and really challenge for the playoffs with the Canadian teams in that division as well.
So as we said at the start of the pod, we are going to bring on a couple Canucks YouTubers, Lego Rocks and Canuck Clay. I'm sure a lot of you guys, especially if you're a Canucks fan watching this video, watching the pod, you are definitely aware of these YouTubers. So whether, you're listening and watching it, I hope you guys are excited to hear. I mean, I wouldn't say they're interviews. They're just more chats about the teams. But just quickly, Lucas, before we're going to bring on Lego Rocks first. Let's just quickly touch on our expectations for the Canucks and the JT Miller trade stuff. So first, let's just talk about the Canucks expectations as they are right now. JT Miller on the team, what we see right now, they just brought in a former Leaf and Ilya Mikheyev. They brought in Kuzmenko from overseas. They have your boy Luke Shen on that right side, like a rock.
My boy.
Demko in net. I mean, they have holes. The fact that Luke Shen is there, and again, no shot at Luke Shen, but the fact that Luke Shen, I would say, because if you watch Tyler Myers play hockey, you know that guy's an absolute just write-off in his defensive zone sometimes. But Luke Shen is I think solid with Quinn Hughes if that's the case. So just quickly, Lucas, I think we already talked about it, but do you see this team in the playoffs?
I want to touch on that defense like you were talking and alluding to with Luke Shen there. I mean, they got Travis Dermott last year as well, another one of our boys. Yeah. But that right side is definitely a weak point for them. I mean, the whole decor isn't very strong. But when you have Luke Shen on your first pair, he fit really well with Quinn Hughes last year. But when behind him you got Tyler Myers and Tucker Poolman, not looking too great there on the right side. And then the left side, we know Oliver Ekman-Larsson is definitely on the decline. And Travis Dermott, I feel like we know what he is now as a bottom pair guy. Quinn Hughes is obviously that one standout there.
Yeah,
I'm really excited to see Kuzmenko. I know he was a point of game player last year overseas, and I'm really excited to see him transition to the NHL. It takes some time to do so. So I don't want everybody thinking he's going to come in and light the world on fire. At least I don't think that's what's going to happen to start. But he looks to be he could be a big difference maker for them. And I have them personally, as we speak now, making the playoffs, but it's going to be tight. It's going to be very tight.
Yeah, my early predictions, I had them third. And I think, back to the JT Miller, what you just said, I think the reason why I've advocated for a JT Miller trade so much is probably boiled down to two reasons. I mean, I could ramble on for so long, but the one reason was, let's be real, like percentage-wise, probability-wise, is JT Miller really like potentially going to repeat what he just did? Like, if you asked me 2 years ago or said 2 years ago that JT Miller was going to be like around a 100-point guy, I would have said you are out of your freaking mind. I specifically see the Canucks in the Pacific Division. I think no one's having them below fifth in this division. Mm-hmm. I don't think. I can't see anyone putting them below fifth. If you are, then I don't know what you're smoking. So I'm just saying, like, they're either going to be on the in-between or in the playoffs. If you feel like Demko's it and you could take this team for a run and maybe get a defenseman as the season moves on, sure. But it's just risky, man. And as you just alluded to, like right now as the depth chart looks, like you're having one of Kuzmenko or Mikheyev, or like one of those guys like playing third, fourth line minutes. And like, that's not why you brought those guys in.
So let's get into it with the guests as well and really ask them about their thoughts on it.
So to talk more about this, and I want to talk more about the other Canucks pieces like a Hoglander and like, and like put Colson and Dickinson, all those guys. So we're going to bring on Lego Rocks Gio and talk a bit about his Canucks team and where it stands going into the 2022-2023 season. So let's talk to Gio from Lego Rocks. Here on the Hot Take Hockey podcast, we got the legend Lucas here with me, my cousin, but an absolute bigger legend in Gio Lego Rocks. I hope at this point, most of you guys know who Lego Rocks is on YouTube. So make sure you guys go hit that subscribe button on his channel. Go check out his content. He does coverage for all hockey, all NHL. But for this episode, more so for his Canucks fandom. So Gio, welcome to the pod, man. And we want to get a lot of your thoughts on the Canucks in this upcoming season.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, by the way. I really appreciate it. But I will have to say, don't know if I'm a bigger legend than Lucas. I'm a pretty small guy in real life. So, yeah.
I don't know about that, man. with that Caulfield jersey, like we were talking about offline, I don't know. That's pretty legendary, man.
Big time.
We'll see. We'll see. Caulfield's also a small guy, too. So who really knows? But, yeah, Canucks, eh?
Canucks. And honestly, man, for me, I think, well, obviously, we're going to talk about a bunch of Canadian teams on all the Canadian teams on the pod. But the Canucks, for me, are just, besides the Flames' big turnover and that story and everything that's happened with the Flames, like the Canucks are next up for the most interesting for me, because this is a team that had fans going crazy at the bubble, absolutely crazy. And then last year, if anything, in my opinion, I thought the expectations, like I thought things were going to be going crazy up. And then obviously with everything that happened with the team and just, we could obviously go through it, but I just think the Canucks, looking at last year, and especially individually for some guys, and we'll talk about the JT Miller storyline, like who would have thought, as much as JT Miller's been amazing for the Canucks. Hey everyone, just to stop in the pod right now, just to add my reaction to JT Miller signing with the Vancouver Canucks to an extension, 7 years, $8 million per. So this was my reaction. This podcast was recorded a day or two before the news of JT Miller signing the extension. So this was my reaction if you haven't watched it yet on YouTube. And also, the rest of the talk was hypothetical on if you'd sign or not with Lego Rocks and Canuck Clay. So this was before JT Miller did sign the extension, just to give you guys context.
Oh, JT Miller signed. Are you kidding me? JT Miller signed 7 years, $56 million, $8 million per. I can't believe this. Sorry, I just saw this coming home. I just saw it as I pulled into the driveway. JT Miller, the Vancouver Canucks re-signed JT Miller, 7-year extension, $8 million per year, $56 million total. Sorry, I just had to repeat that to make sure everyone's listening. So JT Miller, after this year, he was going to be a UFA, so a pending UFA this year, and there's obviously a lot of trade rumors. I've been saying maybe the route was to try to get as much for JT Miller, but if you're the Canucks, you're the organization looking at the situation, you're not getting as much as you can for JT Miller. This is the scenario here. You lock him up. You hope he's still productive over the next couple of years. And if you're not competing at a high level, then you trade him. But this is a lot, man. If the cap goes up, it's not as bad. And I hate making that excuse, but this is a lot. $8 million for JT Miller every year until he's 37 years old. That's a lot. So I love the contract. I love the contract extension in terms of keeping JT Miller and not losing him for nothing after what we just saw with like Johnny Gaudreau and all that situation. But it's a lot. Give me your thoughts, guys, in the comments. I'll spoil this a little bit because if you're watching this video, you're a legend. So drop in the comments right now. Guys, go in the comments right now if you're a legend, whether you're a Canucks fan or not, hockey fan in general. If you're a legend watching this video, comment down below and say, hey, I watched and I'm ready to watch the podcast episodes, because we have a podcast episode coming this weekend with the two-time Cup champ. And we also have a Canucks podcast coming out. So look out for the Canucks podcast with Canuck Clay and Lego Rocks. So we actually recorded it this week. So of course that happens. That's always how it goes. We record with the two legendary Canucks YouTubers. And look what happens. Look what happened. JT Miller signed. So we had a lot of conversation about JT Miller and what the contract, like we talked about that stuff. So I'll have to just add an edit saying, oh, look, we talked about it, and this is their perspective before the contract was signed. So I'll add my little thoughts into the podcast. Lucas and I will probably add like a little clip of us talking about JT Miller. So give me your thoughts, guys. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like, hit the notification bell. I think it's super risky, but better than losing him for nothing. And if they weren't getting the big ask that they were trying to hope for with JT Miller, then I guess this was the route. So we'll see. It's good for the now, really risky for the long term, 37 years old. Is JT Miller's production from last year more of an outlier, or will he be consistently an 80-point guy? If he's consistently an 80-point guy, this is a decent contract. Obviously, 99 points, like when you're getting close to 100 points, like that's unreal. So if he can push even that again a couple of years, like get 80 plus points, JT Miller, and Canucks fans are happy. We'll see what happens, guys. Hope to see you more on the channel, podcasts, videos, streams, all that good stuff.
That was my reaction to the JT Miller extension, and now back to the pod.
People are familiar with JFresh, right? The analytics dude on Twitter. He posted JT Miller's player card like within the past week of recording this podcast episode. And the interesting part about Miller's player card is that nothing really stands out. He's like a 70% wins above replacement, 80% player. But the one or two categories that actually do put him in the top, it's power play assists and power play production. Now, I love JT Miller as much as everybody here in Vancouver does. But I will say that a lot of his points just happen to be in the power play where he's every other pass with Quinn Hughes. The Canucks power play would cycle through with Miller to Hughes to Miller to Hughes to Bo to Brock to goal. It would always be like that. And so I think just taking a look at 99 points by itself, it looks amazing. But as a Vancouver Canucks fan personally, like I know Miller is so valuable to this team because he's really consistent at producing and everything. But at the end of the day, I don't really know if I would confidently say Miller is in the same territory as Artemi Panarin, who also had 90 points. He's in the same territory as a Marner, who also had 90 points. He's in the same territory as the guys who barely broke 100, like Kachuk, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's kind of also where I feel a little bit more reluctant to comment on the extension and whether or not Vancouver should give it to him, because their window of opportunity with Petey and Hughes, it's a little bit down the line, and Miller's already in his early 30s, late 20s. So the alignment there is kind of the problem. And it's why a lot of Canucks fans are hesitant to really make a decision as to what would be the best move, quote unquote. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think that's all great. I mean, JT Miller, another big thing about him too, is this was obviously his career year. And it gets into that discussion. John was speaking about it before we hopped on. Can we see him matching that or exceeding those totals that he hit last year? I mean, just from the outs and looking at the rest of his career, I don't see it. I mean, I can see him getting close to it, but I don't know if I can see him matching or even exceeding it. I think that might have been his peak career season. What about you, John?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say to you, like this is my whole conversation. Like, and I was saying this offline to you. You have put Coles in, you have Höglander, you have Kuzmenko, who you just brought in. Like, I'm just looking at a bigger picture situation here. In terms of like career trajectory, like you just saw a Kadri who did kind of a similar thing to JT Miller and like a less of a sense, obviously he went on to win the cup, but season production, he had a season that we've never seen from Naz and Kadri, similar to what we just saw with JT Miller. So my thing is, you just saw the Flames in August give Kadri 7x7. Can we imagine what JT Miller is going to get? So that's still what Kadri just did and got 7 million. So you know what you're going to give JT Miller. It's going to be above 7 million, regardless of what he does this season. You have all these guys that you're going to have to sign eventually. And JT Miller is going to take up 7 or 8 million of the cap. So you're really hoping that cap goes up big time if you're walking in a guy that's going well into his 30s. So I'll just ask you as I move from that conversation, the Höglander conversation, he's been in trade rumors. Do you think that Höglander, Kuzmenko, do you think these guys will get their looks and get their fair share?
That's a really good conversation to be having, actually, John, because you were talking about the forward depth earlier on. Just with the amount of players that this team has in their forward core, you're going to have at least one of Tanner Pearson, Ilya Mikheyev, Höglander, or anybody else on your fourth line. Like, they have quite a high amount of forwards, honestly. And with the addition of Curtis Lazar too, it makes things a little bit more complicated. Obviously, Bo, Brock, and everybody else is there as well. But when it comes to the ice time conversation and the Höglander conversation specifically, I do think that Bruce would give a little bit of leeway to Kuzmenko. Like, if I just had to personally throw out a guess there, the Vancouver Canucks shelled out a lot of assets and they shelled out a lot of their own personal time to sign Andrei Kuzmenko, driving all the way to Michigan to meet with the guy. Bruce Boudreau went out of his way to do that as well. And that's kind of why Kuzmenko felt the respect from this team, that he was like, yeah, okay, I know they really do value my time and my services, so I'm going to sign here. And so it would kind of surprise me if Bruce Boudreau gave Kuzmenko, I'm going to call it the Travis Green, Brock Besser treatment, where he starts him out on the second power play. He doesn't give him any playing time. Yeah. And then as he works his way up, he eventually becomes the stud that he was in his rookie year. Kuzmenko, I think, is going to get a little bit more of an opportunity. As for Höglander, it's been kind of documented already that Bruce Boudreau has been somewhat unhappy with the way Höglander had played in certain stints of last season. He'd always been saying to the media that there's more for this player to be able to do, there's more for him to give, and there are things that he needs to improve on, which is good. You know, I like it that a coach is going out there and saying that he's not, you know, not all of his guys are perfect. So I like the transparency there. But at the end of the day, it does indicate somewhat of an unwillingness to play a guy like Höglander somewhere in your top six, where some Canucks fans would probably say, hey, you could probably give him top 6 minutes. He might score, let's say, 15 goals on the year. And so for Höglander and the amount of forwards that the Canucks have, I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if we saw some more Höglander rumors popping up there, as we had already seen, as you highlighted as well.
Yeah.
And so with everybody else, you know, there's still a Tanner Pearson conversation to happen there. There is an Ilya Mikheyev who is here on a new deal on a contract that I honestly want to debate whether or not it's fair or not. Yeah. I'm sure you guys have your opinions on that Mikheyev contract, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the trade rumors go for 22-23.
Yeah, I mean, on that conversation, I don't think you're having Lucas or I really defend that Mikheyev contract to a full extent. But here's the thing. Here's what I'll say. The fit could be nice because I think if I was looking at the Canucks roster in terms of what they need up front, it is size and speed. So it's like you're getting that with Mikheyev. Mm-hmm. But just quickly, Gio, I mean, I don't know if Lucas has got a question for you, but just quickly, I want to hear from you. If you had to see a realistic scenario right now between Pearson, Dickinson, Höglander, and Podkolzin, between those four guys, who are the two wingers you could potentially see on the fourth line to start? Because just based on the depth chart right now, two of those guys might actually start on the fourth line, and I like they probably shouldn't.
Oh man, you're probably going to have Lazar on the fourth line automatically.
Centering, and for sure.
Yeah, centering,
sure.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if Dickinson would be that guy, because he really was useless on the wing. Like, he was supposed to be a lot better as a center, but I feel like Dickinson will probably get that third line center spot behind Bo and behind one of Petey or Miller.
So you expect you expect Miller to be on the wing, probably to start?
I'd expect, honestly, I would expect Miller to probably take the faceoffs and then move to the wing, because that's kind of what they did like for most of last season. So when it comes to the fourth line wingers, I could honestly see Tanner Pearson there. Like if they really wanted to go with like Mikheyev and Podkolzin and Kuzmenko and give that Russian connection some middle six ice time, I could see it. So Tanner Pearson being there, and then maybe whoever else could be there if they re-sign Alex Chason, maybe, because they need more right-handed shooters.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, jumping into that, I had a quick question regarding Connor Garland. I know he's been in some rumors back and forth as well, and we haven't really alluded to him yet. So is he more of a second line guy, third line guy? Like, where does he chart out in this lineup? Because he had so much, potential, and people were excited about him coming out of Arizona, but it seems like it hasn't been the easiest fit as of yet. He hasn't bloomed in Vancouver.
And I want to add on to that question too, and double stack that question from Lucas. Do you, as a fan, regret that Canucks Coyotes trade, knowing you could have Dylan Guenther and not have the cap restraints carried with OEL and Garland?
Okay.
Here we go.
I double stacked that question.
Yes.
So talk about Garland's fit and then talk about the trade that we saw.
Firstly, I'll say this, Lucas, I really like the way that you phrase that, because at face value, some may look at Connor Garland and say, hey, the guy was good. He had 50 points. Like, that's a good player, right? But we did have ourselves some articles published on The Athletic. There was one by Harmon Dale in particular, where he interviewed Connor Garland, and he went over pretty much how Garland himself wasn't really all too comfortable with the fit in Vancouver. in his first year. Now, he did sign a $4.9 million extension with Vancouver. He'll be here for the next few years. It's whatever. But that first season apparently wasn't all too great when it comes to how he was feeling about it. And so when it comes to Garland, I think he's a very legit top 6 player on this team. He is so feisty. He's got so much energy. He's small, but he spins around in the corners and he always wins those battles. It's crazy. He's like an absolute treat to watch. It's just really interesting to note how his production actually significantly declined under Bruce Boudreau comparative to Travis Green. When Travis Green was here and everybody sucked, the one player that didn't really suck was Connor Garland. But when Bruce Boudreau took over, everything kind of flipped around. So I'm kind of interested in seeing how they're going to address Connor Garland and his deployment and his playing time next year, because the Vancouver Canucks second power play absolutely sucks. It sucked for a long time, even with guys like OEL and Garland and Alex Chason for some reason on that second power play. It still couldn't get any offense done. They always had to revert to the top unit, Miller, Bo, Petey, etc. And when it comes to Connor Garland himself versus OEL and the other contracts in the trade a year ago, I absolutely think that was one of the worst trades the Vancouver Canucks could have made in that time frame, because like Jay Beagle, Antoine Roussel, and Eriksson, they only combined for like 20 points this previous season in Arizona. Not great. They also combined for $12 million against the cap for Arizona for one season. Meanwhile, Vancouver is taking on OEL, who's making 7.2 against their own cap till 2027. The guy's going to be 36 years old. And Connor Garland's good, but you also gave up that first round pick that became Dylan Genther, who would have been the top prospect in the Vancouver Canucks system today if he was in their system right now. The Canucks also gave up a second round pick, and that pretty valuable right now for a Canucks prospect pool that is looking pretty shallow. And so this is kind of the crux of the Jim Benning mentality of what we had seen for the past 8 years, that Benning and Aquilini just wanted to make the playoffs, and they had this mindset that, hey, if we made the playoffs, anything can happen. That's a quote that he would always say in the press conferences. We want to make the playoffs, we want to be competitive, anything can happen. They didn't want to build a cup contender. They wanted to build a wild card contender that would go on some sort of Cinderella run in the postseason. And that's difficult to go out there and project into actual long-term success. And so the Connor Garland OEL trade was kind of the epitome of that type of mindset. And it's costing them $7.2 million until 2027. I want to go out there and say that Garland is good too at 4.9, but that's still money on the cap. That is significant in some respect. So I do think it was a bad trade.
Yeah, I think a lot of look at that, and Clay's ready to go as we as we're potentially transferring guests. But so yeah, Gio, I'll say, do you have a feeling if I ask Clay that same question, if I ask Canuck Clay that same question on that trade, do you know what he's going to say? And before we go from Gio Legorocks to Canuck Clay, do you have a hot take for us, or any kind of like take on maybe like a big breakout guy for the Canucks? And like, I guess just quickly how you see the season going.
Okay. For Clay, I think he'll go out there and highlight the value of Garland. He'll highlight the value of OEL.
He loves Garland. I know he loves Garland.
OEL is honestly not a bad player. Like, he's not bad. He's okay, but he's not $7.2 million in the slightest worth that. Like, he is absolutely a bad contract, okay player. So I think Clay will go out there and say that from an on-paper perspective, the Canucks did get better, like Beagle, Roussel, Eriksson versus OEL and Garland. Like, that's a better set of players for your team. But financially, there are many limitations with that. So I think that will somewhat be in the realm of what Clay answers. And when it comes to a hot take,
should we let Canuck Clay into the room to hear your hot take?
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
All right.
For sure.
Let's bring him in.
Let's bring him in. This pod's getting wild here.
Clay,
we got Gio here for your entrance to the pod.
Amazing. Look
How's
at this.
it going?
Four good-looking guys. This is
Clay,
perfect.
yes.
So yeah, Clay, this is my cousin. Just quickly, as Gio's about to leave and you're about to enter the space, we're allowing you to be in to hear Gio's hot take for the Canucks this season.
All right. So, hot take. I'm going to go out there and say Andrei Kuzmenko scores 25 goals. 25.
That's spicy. Gio's dropping a bomb on his way out.
I was going to say 20, but then I was like, you know what? I'm on the Hot Take Hockey podcast. It's all about hot takes. Let's add 5 more, baby. Andre Kuzmenko, 25 goals. Let's say that.
Well, Lego, as Canucks coming in, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I know we're going to do other collabs, and I mean, even with Canuck Clay right here, I mean, the 3 of us and now Lucas in the picture, we're going to do some collabs coming in. So, Gio, for Lucas and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Gio.
Yeah, 100%, guys. Anytime. Happy to be here.
All right, man. We'll chat soon, and wish Canuck Clay luck. I mean, we're going to grill him a bit on his Canucks here.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a hard act to follow. Good luck. Thanks, Gio. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, good luck, Clay. Good luck, Clay. I'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, chat soon, Gio. Honestly, I like this. It's a little it's a little casual, just connecting of guests here, and we were having a good chat. So I was like, you know what? Why do we need to stop the chat when we can just go right from one legend to another?
Well, nice to meet you, Lucas and John. Thanks for always being so kind to me, giving me and my good-looking Canucks views a platform to share. Appreciate it.
Man,
nice
I really
to meet you too, buddy.
It. Yeah, and honestly, guys, if you haven't yet, make sure you go subscribe to Canuck Clay. We're going to drop the links down below. Lucas, I'll let you, we're going to fire a couple questions here, but just our conversation carrying from Gio was, and he predicted what you were going to say. So looking back now, I know it's hindsight and seeing the situation, and those contracts are now off the books. Like they would have been off the books, but do you regret the Canucks making that Garland OEL trade? And now with such the cap conversation, re-signed JT Miller, is that a deal? I know you love, hey, me and Gio agreed. We always hear you praising Connor Garland. So is that a trade you regret in some sense right now?
Oh man, what right off the bat, regret.
Oh, we're going Canuck. We're not wasting any time, Clay. We're not wasting any time.
Brothers, regret is such a strong word. Would I have preferred that they not make that trade? Seeing what Dylan Guenther did this season, knowing that that's $12 million, that's tough. I do like Garland. I do like OEL, but that's honestly, in hindsight, now that I think about it, if I'm to be realistic, would I use the word regret? Maybe I'd stop short of regret, but I'd say it's got me thinking. How's that? How's that for a sitting on the fence answer?
There we go.
I love it. Yeah. So Clay, thank you so much for coming on. So we talked a lot about the forwards and the situation with Gio, and I've watched your pod and listened in on a lot of your opinions, but I've also heard a lot of like you talk about the defense. So let's transfer this conversation to the defense, because I do really want to hear specifically your opinion on the defense and the status of the defense of this team. Are you feeling really uncomfortable with where it's at? I'll just fire no bullshit, just straight at you.
Yeah, no, I like that. Not uncomfortable. I could be more comfortable for sure. I think, as I'm sure you guys talked about, our forwards are way better than last year, adding to an already strong forward group. Our goaltenders are going to be great. Demko, I know how much you like Demko, John. I've heard you rave about him.
Time.
I'm a big Demko fan too, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I know you're with the NHL, so you know a lot too, Lucas, of course. But when it comes to the D, they are basically going to roll out the same group. You're taking out Hamonic and you're putting in Dermott, and then now you have Jack Rathbone coming in. So it's basically the same group. And it's a group that it isn't the strongest for sure, but all our strength is stacked on our left side. You have Quinn Hughes and you have Oliver Ekman-Larsson on our left side. And then technically Travis Dermott, you guys know quite well. They say he can play both sides, but they tried him on the left when he got here. And you have Jack Rathbone, almost a Quinn Hughes light, not as talented, but similar kind of profile, all on the left. On the right, it's kind of the same type of player. You got a Tyler Myers, you got a Luke Schenn, you got a Tucker Pullman, if he's even healthy. So those are kind of like the top 7 we're looking at. Yeah. So what's really interesting, you guys, if Pullman starts the season on the injured list, they're talking about putting OEL and Hughes together as a top pairing and moving one of them to the right. And then you can see very clearly, then it evens it out a little bit. But we'll see. Hughes is obviously smart enough to do that and talented enough to do that. I think OEL's got the wisdom and experience to do that. I don't know if it's their strength though. So we'll see if they actually go there.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like, just from the outside, it doesn't look like it would be a natural fit, as both of them are a little bit more, well, at least OEL in his heyday was more of an ozone guy and less of a defensive defenseman. But I know Quinn Hughes got really comfortable with Luke Schenn last year. Yeah. He's my boy too, back in from his time in Toronto. So what do you think about Luke Schenn getting a lot of minutes with Quinn Hughes if that continued this year?
Luke, not because it's your name. I just realized that Luke Schenn, Toronto connection. We basically half of our team is from the Maple Leafs now. Is that what it is?
Yeah. What's going on? Vancouver Leafs, like Calgary Canucks. What's going on in Canada?
John, we just need that Engvall guy to come over here.
Yeah. Engvall and Justin Hall.
No, just staying involved. Just staying involved. Okay, you're right, Lucas. When it comes to Schenn, stay at home, tough guy, willing to stand up for Hughes and do all those good things. I will say, and you nailed it. OEL coming into last season, he was a 0.5 points per game player, 40 points every single season. But they kind of miscast him as the defensive shutdown guy with Myers, who's kind of weird too. He's not a bad skater for his size, but still not the best shutdown guy either. So maybe it's just speaking to a lack of, honestly, shutdown defensemen on this Canucks team. So to answer your question, I like Hughes with Schenn. It's not like Schenn holds back Hughes. In fact, he allows Hughes to kind of flourish that way. But I still think if you want to get more out of OEL, how do you do that? Do you try him on a guns a-blazing pairing with Quinn Hughes?
Wow. So how do you see that formatting the rest of the way? Because I think we've talked about this, Clay, on the last time we collabed together. Is like, I'm not even a Canucks fan, but just ship Tyler Myers to the frickin' moon. Like, maybe that's aggressive, but watching that guy as the Canucks were trying to make the playoffs, I was just like, what is going on here? Like, I think he's got all the tools. And I wonder if they love him because of like what he could be, but it's just, I've seen this guy time and time again, just make brutal mistakes. And I forget which game it was, but it was in overtime and Myers is like getting out of position, swinging his stick around and just getting, I don't know. To me, I like the idea of Hughes with OEL, if you can get another defenseman in there, that's not because so in that situation, that's what I was going to ask you. Who's Myers with and who's Schenn with in that situation? If you slide OEL up, because then you're really asking for a lot from maybe a guy like Dermott or something.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So if you say Myers should be on your second pairing, if you say that, then on the left side, that leaves either a Dermott or Jack Rathbone. And on one hand, I kind of like Rathbone with Schenn because I kind of just hinted that Rathbone kind of plays a little bit like Quinn Hughes. Yeah. If Schenn could play with Hughes, you think Schenn could play with Rathbone. Then you go Dermott and Myers as your second pairing. Not sure if you're comfortable with that. The other way is you go Dermott with Schenn and you go Rathbone with Myers, but I think that's too many minutes for Rathbone because Myers, they did lean on him. And your perspective, John, on Myers is so fascinating because he's such a polarizing player here. Yes, a lot of people hated that contract 3 years ago, but now guess what? There's only 2 years left at $6 million. He could actually be a buyout candidate, maybe not this season, but next season. But for a guy who's 6'7", it's unbelievable how when he lies across the ice, instead of becoming like 7'8" with his wingspan, he becomes like 4'3". You can't, the number of pucks that get through him, around him, underneath him for a 6'7" guy, it doesn't make sense. Like logically.
I've never had, like, maybe this is an extreme take, but I've never had a non-Leaf piss me off to watch more than maybe Myers recently. Like I'm not even joking, man, because he like 6'7", man, you've got to figure it out way more than he's doing, especially $6 million. I get frustrated with Justin Hall at $2 million. If I had Myers at $6 million for my team, I think I'd go like psychotic more than I even do right now.
Lucas, what do you think about Myers from what you've seen?
You know what? I've always been a Tyler Myers fan, but that might be me with the goggles, thinking of his old days with Buffalo in his older years, or his younger years, I guess you could say. But yeah, with Vancouver, I have some friends in Vancouver and they say the same thing as you, Canuck Clay. I feel like he's polarizing. Some of them really like him. Some of them, because he has all the tools in the toolbox, like John said, but it's like, can he pull it all together? It seems like it's just inconsistent. I wanted to transition to the goaltending. Sure. Because like I said, I'm a big Demko fan. I guess we're all Demko fans here. Yeah. But I don't know too much about Spencer Martin. Now I know he's the backup going into the season. Halak's obviously departed to the Rangers. Yeah. What do you expect out of Spencer Martin? How many starts do you think they're going to give him? Or do you think they're going to have to, bring in a more veteran presence to shore that goaltending up? Yeah.
Great question. The hope always is about a 2/3, 1/3 split, right? 55-27 or whatever you want to say. So Halak didn't do his share of 1/3 last year. I think he only played 15 or 16 games. And it's too bad because he was on a decent contract, but he triggered some bonuses. I love the way our goaltending is shaping up. You have Demko at 4 more years at $5 million. That's I think one of the best. I think you would agree. Yeah, it's a steal. Then you have Martin coming in, who's actually technically a year older than Demko. He's 27 years old, only making his $762,000. So for a solid goaltending for $6 million, both guys all in, that's pretty good. You guys, Martin played 6 games last season. He didn't lose in regulation. He went 3-0-3. So 3 wins, 0 regulation losses, and then 3 extra time losses, i.e. overtime or shootout. He is big. He's not as big as Demko and Vasilevsky and those guys, but he's big. He's very much like Demko. He's very efficient with his movement. He's not a flailer. He's not a read and react. He's simply a read, and he kind of covers up a lot of that. And watch the next time the Canucks play on TV when Martin's playing. I don't know if he's got a microphone built into his pad, you guys, but he makes the loudest pad saves. Like, I'll be at the arena and a shot will go in and you hear boom, and you're kind of looking around what happened. I don't know what's going on, but maybe just saying that Martin's very solid. Maybe he hits it flush. So he's going to be great. If he can take, if he can win close to half his games as a backup and get us those 10 to 12 wins, and you have Demko getting your 34, 35 wins out of maybe the 55 games he plays, there's your 97 points and there's your playoff spot.
So on what you just said, playoffs. Yeah. So we talked about earlier in the pod. Is that what is happening for the Canucks here maybe this year? Yeah. Demko conversation and the playoffs. Like, I look at that guy and, like, even with this, I'll call it questionable defense, I feel like this guy is as good as a bunch of maybe not a Vasilevsky yet for that conversation, but like when I talk about like Shesterkin or like I talk about Hellebuck, like now I'm putting Demko right there, right in that top 5. So I think, is that enough for the questionable defense? I mean, we saw Pittsburgh win a cup with, what was it, like Ron Hainsey and Justin Schultz as their 2 best defensemen because Dumoulin and Letang were on crutches. So I don't know. I think I'll ask you this 2-part question, Clay.
Sure.
Confident in playoffs, yes or no, combined with, do you have a crazy hot take for us?
Okay. Well, John, I watch all your videos, so I know you pegged the Canucks as 3rd in the Pacific. I am doing the same thing. I admit, as much as I can't stand them, that the 2 Alberta teams, they actually improved, I think. So I put them at the class of the Pacific. But you look at, I know they just picked up Aiden Hill, but you look at the Vegas Golden Knights and you worry about their goaltending and their injury and just the way they treat their players. LA, you never know. They got a bunch of young guys. Will they put it all together? I don't worry about the San Jose, Anaheim, and Arizonas of the world. So I think there is a realistic path for the Canucks to finish in 3rd, but they are going to have to outscore their problems, as I'm sure you guys are aware of with the forwards compared to the D. But I do think if the Canucks are even scoring a few more goals, not a game, but a few more goals total, more than they did last year, in theory, you think that relieves the pressure on the D, in theory. And then with the Demko Martin combo, I do think that's strong enough to backstop in the playoffs for sure. So that's my answer.
So do you think it's a real
third or bust?
Do you think it's a realistic outcome that we could see all 3 Canadian Western teams in that 1, 2, 3 spot? Like
1, 2, 3.
That'd be nuts.
I would love it. Then I would, of course that means we'd have to beat one of them in the first round, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I could see it happening. And I know a lot of fans here, they're really excited when Kuzmenko signed. Then we're trying to figure out if MCKAY is worth the contract. You guys can tell me that off air. Then we're excited about Lazar. Dakota Joshua is going to be interesting. So we'll see. And then you hope for another strong season. JT Miller's still here amazingly. And then I'm sure you talked about that with Gio and PD and Hughes. So there's a lot of good players on this team. And the Boudreaux bump was real. You guys saw it. They went 17 games over 500 with them.
Oh, that was so much fun to watch at the end. Sorry, I cut you off there. Do you have a crazy take for this team?
My crazy take is they are in a playoff spot in the trade deadline. JT Miller remains a Canuck, and they risk losing him for nothing at the end of the season.
So JT Miller signs with another team in the offseason is what I'm hearing.
I don't know. That's not a hot take, I know, but I think the hot take might be that the Canucks end up keeping him through the trade deadline and risk. I don't think it's the right move. But I could, you guys heard of Francesco Aquilini, the owner. He so badly wants to make the playoffs, get that revenue. Imagine if the Canucks are in a playoff position and they don't want to move Miller at the trade deadline. It's going to be, it's a talking point now. It's going to be such a talking point 6 months from now.
So they use them as their own version of a rental is how I'm hearing it. That's what I think they're going to do as well. And I think it's going to be tough for them to justify to the fan base to move them if they're in the midst of the playoffs, right?
Yeah. And you're right, Lucas. You're gonna tick off half the fan base by moving him because don't you want to make the playoffs? You're gonna tick off the other half by saying that's really bad asset management. And actually, both can be true. I think.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens. But Clay, man, thank you so. I mean, we're gonna do this more throughout the season. I hope. I hope you'll come back and thank you so much, man. Again, everyone, go check out the Canuck Clay channel. What a legend! I mean, Look at this guy. What a beauty.
What a legend.
Well, Lucas, I just met you like 10 minutes ago, but I liked you already. And John, thanks for always having me, for your support. And I'm really excited for what you guys are doing on your channel with this new pod and everything. And of course, with your YouTube stuff as well. You are the model that these West Coast guys aspire to be. How's that, John?
Wow.
Exactly. That was funny, but we can basically end it there. But I just wanted to come back, again, just say thank you. And honestly, if we ended it right there, you praising me was not a bad way to finish it off there.
Well, yeah, I'll leave it to you guys if you need to do some sort of outro or whatever. But no, honestly, I'm really excited for what you're doing. So are you going to go weekly? Is that the plan, or are you going to see what happens kind of thing?
Yeah, weekly is probably the plan. We're thinking because it's always just between. Yeah, we don't want it to be spoiled yet, but we already told Gio, so we'll tell you. But we brought on Christopher Stieg for our first episode.
That's awesome.
And we're hoping to bring on some other guys that just it's honestly, Clay, it's tough. I mean, I know for you, I'm sure we could pick at your brain here for a second at your advice on how you approach it. But Lucas, I don't know if you've seen some of Clay's brought on quite a few really cool guests. I know you've brought on Shannon, the hockey guy. You've brought in a lot of the Canucks.
Yeah.
So we continue to talk to Clay offline, but just wanted to give another big shout out to Lego and Canuck Clay. We're going to finish off the pod here and do a little bit of an outro and do a little bit of a close to the pod. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that chat, and back to the podcast with Lucas and I.
All right. So that was a lot of fun talking to both Clay and Gio from Legorocks. Lucas, that was your first kind of interaction with both guys. I've kind of interacted with them through YouTube and done a couple collabs, but what was your impression on both guys? And does it feel like, I feel like when you talk to guys like that, right in the fan base and have a personality, have a YouTube page, I feel like you get a lot from the team, even more so than you already knew.
Yeah, man. Both of them, first of all, both of them are beauties, man. High energy. You can tell they're very passionate about the Canucks. And I follow the Canucks from a distance, but they know the ins and outs of the team. So it's great to hear, their opinions and their takes on trades and different players that the Canucks have. Those hot takes though, Kuzmenko with 25 goals. I like that one. Yeah. And the Canucks not trading JT Miller and probably letting him walk in the off season. I mean, I think both of those they are hot takes, but I can see both of those coming to fruition, really.
Yeah, I think Kuzmenko reaching, Gio was saying he was going 20 goals and then he did the extra little spice for a hot take. But yeah, I could see Kuzmenko reaching 20 goals. I could also see JT Miller, that exact thing happening, but that's why I've been so aggressive about it. It's they have the mindset of not doing a short-term thing the way they did with the OEL Garland trade. And I just feel like this is such a short-term thing that's going to put you back long-term. I understand what Gio's saying 100%, and I agree with him to an extent. But my thing is, you're not really, I don't see it as fully settling, because if you don't make the move for JT Miller and things do not go your way, not only are you not getting any value back just on the surface for JT Miller, you're decreasing, as I said earlier, you're decreasing the value on guys like Höglander and Podkolzin, who could be getting so much more minutes on 5-on-5, but obviously on the power play. We just talked about all the production JT Miller soaks up on that power play. Obviously, if you put Höglander or Podkolzin in that position, yeah, they're not going to be as successful as JT Miller likely. But if you're in a situation with Pettersson, Horvat, Besser, and Quinn Hughes, you're going to put up points.
Yeah, no matter who you are, if you got some skill, Kuzmenko would probably thrive there as well.
100%.
But as far as a point that Gio made that I really like too, in terms of trading JT Miller, arguing for that, he doesn't align with the Canucks age group typically, as far as the Petterssons and the Hughes go, right? So as they're getting to their late 20s, JT Miller's already going to be quite a bit older. And do you want to give him that contract? I know you alluded to Kadri with his breakout year this year, and Miller had his last year. Do you want to give him that contract and have JT Miller making 7.5, 8, whatever the number ends up coming in at, into his late 30s? I mean, that's the question the Canucks got to ask themselves if they're going to offer him that deal.
Yeah, and let's assume, I want to transfer this conversation to guys we haven't talked about as much. So let's assume that the Canucks are keeping Pettersson and Hughes for the long term. Say, hypothetically, which I don't know if I really believe this, but hypothetically, everything works out. They re-sign JT Miller, we'll say 8 years, 7.5 million per, or something like that, right? Yeah. We'll say it works out in a good way for them. I think it's going to be higher than that, but if JT Miller sinks down to 70 points, I could see something like that. say that happens. You've got a logjam if you're still trying to keep guys like Podkolzin and Kuzmenko for the long term, and you have McKay there. We have the guys we just talked about. Is there then a conversation where the Canucks consider trading like a Besser or Horvat? I mean, you talk about Horvat being the captain. I've seen Canucks fans online as recently as the last couple of weeks opt to re-sign JT Miller and trade a guy like Horvat and have Miller and Pettersson as your 1-2. Or like, as I just said, have Besser as a trade to keep Miller. So like, do you have a preference? Like, I love Brock Besser, but he's very streaky. Mm-hmm. I think Horvat has his streaks too, but I like his leadership. I like the role he has with the Canucks. I think they should try to keep him long term. And then if you're keeping Petey, it just goes back to the JT Miller trade. So like, where's your kind of head at that?
Yeah, I've always thought that Brock Besser was going to be a Canuck like for life. I mean, they gave him the captaincy.
You mean Bo Horvat?
Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah.
Bo Horvat. Bo Horvat. I mean, I thought he'd be a Canuck for life. So that's where I still sit on that. As far as Brock Besser goes, I mean, he's always
he's been in trade rumors a lot.
There's always been rumors around Brock Besser, and with him, I feel like we're going to be talking about this over and over again when we have something like Johnny Gaudreau go down, where it's an American moving from Canada to the States. But with Brock Besser being an American and with him having issues with the contract sometimes, like contract discussions with the Canucks, you have to think eventually this dam's going to break and he's going to move on. So if you're telling me I can keep one or the other, I'm keeping Bo Horvat, the captain, and I would move Brock Besser. That would be my choice.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a stupid take, but I just long term, if you're keeping those guys I just said, like something's got to give. So if they opt to try to keep Höglander, Podkolzin and still get something out of those guys, like you're not going to see all three of Miller, Besser, and Horvat as a Canuck long term. You're just not. Mm-hmm. It's just not realistic. It's very crowded in that forward group. And I mean, yeah, it took us until like the Geo conversation for us to even bring up Garland, because that's like, it's just a natural thing for me right now that I keep forgetting about the guy, because you have so many other guys in that forward group that could easily be top 9 forwards in so many other teams. Like the fact that right now on Daily Faceoff, they have Höglander on the 4th line is freaking nuts to me, considering 2 years ago how high people were on Höglander and like what he was doing when he got there. And then obviously with Boudreau, Höglander was getting buried in that lineup. So that's my other concern, is like, where's Höglander's value? That's why I also made a hot take. Like there's a couple other like younger defensemen out there. I'm not necessarily vouching for Sandin to be in this conversation, but like, is it a bad idea in the Canucks perspective? I'm not saying the Leafs should do this and like that either of us would want this, but like if you're the Canucks and you have a Höglander situation, why wouldn't you reach out to the Sens and see what's going on with Eric Brandstrom? Reach out to the Leafs and see what's going on with Rasmus Sandin. Reach out to some of these teams and like, you're thin on defense. You're the Canucks and you're thin on defense. You're crowded in forward group. To me, that's just like such a common sense thing to go to. There's a few teams that have defensemen that are, specifically when we see the Leafs, Sandin's out of the picture right now in terms of straight out depth chart. Straight out depth chart, Sandin's, he shouldn't be, but he is the 7th guy on that list. Mm-hmm. And he shouldn't be. So my thing is, if you're the Canucks, you need to make one of these moves. I just don't know why you're going into the season. I get injuries happen, but like a 4th line for a forward group is so easy to fill from guys from the AHL, from guys that grow into opportunities. You don't want to be sinking guys like Pearson and Höglander or even Podkolzin or whoever it is on that 4th line. I just think it's stupid. So if you're not making a JT Miller trade, there's other routes you got to go, because there's going to be guys here that their value will decrease heavily if you don't make a move
rapidly. And some of these guys make, have a decent cap hit, like Tanner Pearson. And like we discussed, I don't think any of these are really 4th line fits other than Curtis Lazar, who I think fits that 4th line mold as a 4th line center. But Pearson, Podkolzin, none of these guys really you would think are 4th line players. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And I was just going to add to this, and I'll talk more about this if I make like a Canucks lineup prediction video. But what I meant to bring up with Gio is, so Dickinson, it seems like he plays better up the middle. So what I was thinking is like, okay, so you keep JT Miller for the year, you run a top 3 centers of Pettersson, Horvat, Miller. You run those 3 as your centers. You slide Dickinson down to the center spot. You slide Lazar to the right wing, where he did play a lot in Boston. So if you have Lazar on the right wing, you have Dickinson at the center, and then you have, I don't know, Pearson on the left wing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one that's just going to be a mess because of the cap hit. But like, so Pearson on the left wing, at least you have Höglander, Podkolzin, and Kuzmenko all in the top 9, and they're getting their minutes. Because I think those are the 3 for me that are very crucial. You cannot have, especially at their age, like Kuzmenko's a bit older, but like I'll pull it up right now. Podkolzin's still what?
Yeah, Kuzmenko's 26.
Podkolzin is 21 still. I think, he's 21, and Höglander is what? 22, 23? 21. Höglander's still 21. He turns 22 in December. Especially Höglander, like more so Höglander and Podkolzin. But the reason why I'm putting Kuzmenko into that mix is because he's coming from overseas and he's a little delayed on his progression on North American hockey. So it's just like you have 3 guys that you do not want to fool around with their progression and their potential here. And I just think all 3 guys could be huge for the Canucks long-term in the top 9. So that's why I'm saying, do you run like a Pearson, Dickinson, Lazar 4th line and let those guys reach their potential? If you can spread it out, put Kuzmenko, Kuzmenko, and Höglander, all 3 of those guys with each of Pettersson, Miller, Horvat, then you're probably getting a lot more out of it. And then spreading McKayev, Besser, and Garland the rest of the way. That's the way
I like that a lot for spreading the offense around too, because right now you're going to have, like you said, you have some players with more flair on the 4th line. And right now I think the first line is a little too top heavy. I think you can move, instead of having Miller, Pettersson, and Besser together, it might be good to see what your lineup looks like if you move one of those players, either Pettersson or Miller, off that top line and move them down. And also Ilya Mikheyev, you're paying him 4.75 and he's going to be on your 3rd or 4th line. I mean, for the Leafs, it made sense playing, 3rd line most of the time, but and then he did play 2nd line with Tavares and Nylander as well. But for here, with the contract that he's got, you got to let him, try to get hot off the get-go, off the jump start here. So I really like that idea, John, and it'd be interesting to hear what our guests would have said, Canuck Clay and Gio, and we got to ask them again when we bring them on. But I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, just spitballing, if you ran like if you kept Horvat with Garland and kept Pettersson with Besser, then like you could have one of McKayev or Podkolzin on that top line to balance it out. Maybe one of McKayev or Podkolzin being a fellow Russian with Kuzmenko to make him more comfortable with like a Horvat as like a checking line, maybe. Even though Kuzmenko less that fit, but like if like McKayev is with Horvat, and then like your 2nd line, I mean, you just got to get Höglander going. Like that's the one that bugs me, because like Höglander, the high potential coming in. So if he's on a line with, I don't know, like Garland and Miller or something, I honestly don't know how they're going to go about it, but I just think that 4th line, that might be smarter to have Dickinson up the middle and slide Lazar over if you have Miller up the middle, as I said. So I don't know. Do you have any other kind of points on the Canucks or the Pacific Division in general? Like we had that conversation, like the 3 Canadian teams in that 1, 2, 3 spot. It'd be nice. It'd be fun, but I don't know. I feel
it'd be
Kings
great.
Or Kings or Knights are going to spoil it.
It'd be great for NHL.com and the NHL app as well, because we'd get lots of viewership there. So I'm rooting for it. I'm rooting for those Canadian teams. But I think if the Canucks were to come 3rd, like we all seem to think right now, that seems to be the spot we're penciling them in at. I do think the Oilers and Flames are a little bit in a class of their own above the Canucks. So that's how I kind of see it charting out. But I do see the Vegas Golden Knights. I don't know how much this Adin Hill trade really affects my take on it that much, but I see Vegas and Vancouver battling for that 3, and then maybe the wild card spot is how I'm seeing it right now. And that might be just, recency bias that I'm hot and high on Vegas.
So are you low on LA right now still?
Man, I'm telling you, these 3 teams, it's just, I don't have one clearly above the other. I feel like I'm going to go back and forth until the season starts.
So you're
on
solid.
These 3.
You're confident Edmonton, Calgary will exchange. Like
I think, yes, Edmonton and Calgary are my 1-2. But I think I'm more high on LA.
I think that's where we differ. I think that's the only spot where we differ. I think we're all in the same conversation of the 5 teams that are in the conversation for playoffs in that Pacific. But
why? What would be your 1-2? I want to hear your 1-2.
I honestly think, as I said, I think if LA gets the goaltending, I think they will be in a division spot. I think they have to be above like 9-10 save percentage, and I think LA is in the playoff spot. I'm only saying that because we're talking about the Canucks. Like the only advantage I give the Canucks over the Kings kind of is like the goaltending. I don't think either defense is significant over the other, and I don't think either forward group is significant over the other. I think it's easy for us to hype up the Canadian team sometimes, but the Kings just added Fiala. So like when I look at the Kings top 6, like Deneau, Horvat play similar roles. You have your star center in Kopitar. You have stud wingers in Fiala, Kempe, Arvidsson's great. And then you have all your young guys coming in.
I think Sean Darcy.
Yeah, there's some there. I think if guys like Byfield and if a couple of guys with the Kings, like even Trevor Morris looked great. Like I said, I don't know. I mean, the Kings just they surprised me last year. I just think a young team like that, I have a hard time seeing them make playoffs, take a step back. I could be wrong. Maybe they don't do anything, but I think Kings and Knights, man, the goaltending is such a question mark that I don't know what to expect. But again, the Pacific Division is so weak.
Yeah, and then you don't want to. We're not going to cross over into another division conversation right now. But as far as the wild card breaks out, obviously that has impact on how the Central Division does, and the Central Division has always been a little bit stronger, and we're starting to see that shift, I think, a little bit now. But yeah, so obviously we don't know how many wildcard spots are going to be up for grabs for teams in the Pacific. So if it might only be 3 that make it through. So if the Canucks can't get into that top 3 spot, they might be on the outside looking in. But yeah, I do like the Kings point because I think the Kings are very consistent. I would take them to be more consistent over Vancouver. I feel like Vancouver is a little more hot and cold, and they have a few weeks where they're buzzing, and all of a sudden everyone's going, look at these Canucks. And then they, sometimes it falls from grace really quick, where I think the Kings will be consistently there all year. But yeah, we're just going to have to see what happens when the puck drops on October 7th.
Yeah. So on the conversation of Pacific Division, we're going to have more episodes coming in talking about this division with specific around teams. So there might be a little bit of overlap, but if you guys are a fan of hockey, fan of the NHL, fan of the Canucks, whoever you're a fan of, I appreciate you watching. I know Lucas, I think we've had a good time so far recording the pod episodes, and yeah, honestly, just thank you so much for watching, guys. Any last kind of takes or any pointers or any comments on the way out here, Lucas?
I'm just really, really happy how it's going so far, and I was thrilled to talk to 2 beauties today that I'm hoping you all love our conversation with them on the Canucks. And we're looking forward to diving deeper into all Canadian teams as well as all of the 4 divisions. So keep on the lookout for more content from us and the next podcast episode.
Yes, this was episode 3, little Canucks